Man, it's been a very challenging day today. Just a lot of just working with individuals with all these different situations going on in their lives. Man, it was today was very emotional. A lot of ups and downs. A lot of just there's a lot. It's a lot to process. A lot to. It's one of those days where you just go those ups and downs. And I think that's a good. I don't know. I feel like that's a good segue into what we can discuss today. Just kind of some coping mechanisms. You hear a lot of dialogue talking about triggers and what are some good things to do when triggers take place. Like I don't know, for me, like a trigger, something that would trigger me would be something that I'm the type of person who does not like to see like bullying type of actions, right?
So that triggers you.
It triggers me, yeah. So when I see somebody treating somebody different because they're at a higher socioeconomic status and they're more or less talking down to somebody, that really kind of just triggers me.
So to be more specific for our audience, we're talking about how homeless veterans are treated from other people.
Yes. Yeah.
That work with homeless veterans.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's a homeless veteran service provider, whether it's a provider that is, claims that they work with veterans. Yeah.
Okay.
So and I think that, but this doesn't have to necessarily just pertain to homeless veterans.
Sure.
I think veterans in general sometimes that they're talked down to because of their lack of experience in certain fields, or their lack of knowledge in certain things, or their lack of education, or their and so I don't know. I just this is our first kind of event doing something that's like in person, like live taking place, and so I just figured for me it was a roller coaster of a day, and you just want to, we want to be genuine with this thing, and we want to kind of discuss things that are going to, not necessarily get things off our chest, but just, these are real life scenarios, and it doesn't matter if you're a homeless veteran, or a veteran that's, just seeking services to better your circumstances. So what do you think? I mean, what are some, because you got a lot of experience with this, with triggers and working through these, when something triggers you, what are some coping mechanisms?
Yeah, that's a very general question.
Yeah.
So I'll reference it back to you.
Okay.
You mentioned when somebody's being treated in the belittling way,
Mm-hmm.
or if they're less than, that triggers you.
Mm-hmm.
So what people need to do is figure out what the trigger is. They know they've been triggered, but a lot of times it's hard to relate what triggered it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's based off emotion. And when you're in the heat of the moment and you feel the emotion, whether it be rage, anger, disgust, whatever that emotion is, that's what you feel first. And it often barriers when you trying to find out what the trigger is.
Mm-hmm.
So for your case, knowing that triggers you, and because of the job you have, it's something you can't walk away from.
Right.
So what they would recommend for psychology wise, they recommend behavioral therapy.
Okay.
So behavioral therapy is first recognizing the trigger, and then trying not to let that trigger bring an emotion out that's going to be detrimental to the environment you're in.
Okay.
So if you become triggered and you become loud and you become very direct and like, this is what I need, that's probably not going to get you as far as you would being in a straightforward, like, switch it on them, tell them to explain to you why this is making sense. And when they can't come up with the scenario that why it makes sense, it becomes, they realize it's more on them than it is on you. But yeah, so the first step is realizing the trigger. So the thing with behavioral therapy, it actually is something that you have to do constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically a fancy way of saying retrain the way you think.
Okay.
And the way because you can't run from your emotions. Whatever emotions you have, they're not right or wrong.
Right.
It's just your emotion. It's like love, anger, whatever. However you feel the time, that's your emotion. It's how we react to the emotion. And you hear the phrase a lot, like, "You made me mad, so you made me wreck my car."
Right.
That statement is not true. Nobody makes you act a certain way.
No, but in the moment, and this is great, man. You're really touching on some things that I think that is going to benefit not just us that work in this line of work, but just in veterans in general. Because, and we'll definitely, I think that it's important to however we need to get the information out there to come up with like some sort of a bullet points, kind of what we're discussing right now, so that people can take away from and be like, look, like you said, you need to retrain in those specific moments. Because for me, and for those that may or may not be watching, Thomas has seen me triggered numerous times. So, for me, this is something that I do need to work on to better me as a person, and to better me as a professional, and to better me just in all areas of life. Because it can be at work, it can be at home. If I have small children at home.
Yes.
Small children can, not so much for me personally. It's not so much in that realm as it is in this realm. But there are times where your little ones are just like just rah, and sometimes you just snap, and for me, my biggest flaw is the lashing out. If I see somebody that's being treated in a negative way based on their because somebody is treating them a different way because of the easiest way to put it is a socioeconomic status thing.
Yeah.
It's a status.
So let's try to jump away from these fancy words, because we know what socioeconomic means, but maybe some people don't understand that it means I earn this much money, you earn this much money, I have this much education, you don't have that.
Right.
I have a car, you don't. That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
So
Good point.
So let's talk about emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that term?
I've heard about it, read a little bit about it, but you probably know a lot more than I do.
Well, emotional intelligence is that frame of mind we go into when we're triggered.
Okay.
So the way you act when you're triggered shows me your emotional intelligence, which is probably like a teenager.
Yeah. So I'm failing.
Okay?
Yeah.
Not bad. I mean, some people have the emotional intelligence of a 5-year-old, and they could be 40, 50 years old. But what that tells me, it gives me an existential or like a background to where you were first triggered somewhere in your life.
Okay.
So I'm just shooting in the dark. Let me know if I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
So somewhere in your teenage years, you experienced something like this before, whether it be with your parents, siblings, friends, teachers, something like that.
I would say, yeah, like classmates.
Okay.
Yeah, in school. Yeah.
So you saw somebody get bullied, maybe not you, maybe somebody else, and you might not have reacted to it, but it was something that bothered you. So whenever you're sparked by emotions, our instinct is to go back to what we know. And what you know is how you were at that age, is how you react to it now as an adult. Does that make sense?
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we look at your past history, sometimes understanding why you act a certain way is a good part to understanding how you can change.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not that teenager anymore. You're still a young man, but you're way more capable of reacting in a different way than you were when you were a teenager. So next time you're triggered and you can't get away from the situation, what are you gonna think about after this conversation we just had?
Well, I'm going to attempt to not look at myself as a bumbling idiot that's enraged. I'm going to attempt to. Counting to 10 has never worked for me.
It doesn't work for everyone.
You know, like because I count to 10, but I can't. Like I just keep going and still. So for me, I need to figure out. Well, first and foremost, you said the most important thing is this is something that you need to work on all the time.
Yes.
So even when I'm not necessarily in a state where I've been triggered, but maybe I'm just in a state where I'm in a calm, happy state, I need to think, hey, when the trigger takes place, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. And then follow through.
How are you gonna react?
Yeah. You don't have to spend a lot of time on it either. It could just be something you remind yourself in the morning, because ultimately you're stressing yourself out for no reason. Because the other person that triggered you, they don't even care. They
Right.
don't even know.
Right.
They're not stressed, but you are.
But my behavior could potentially create tension in the workplace with other coworkers, and that could lead down a negative path towards because this isn't like, and for me, like I've always been pretty good at exiting the environment that I'm in for deployments, for example. We've both been on deployments, and I was pretty good at like leaving the deployment in the deployment space and coming back home, and for the most part, right? Now there's certain traumas that have taken place in both spaces, but certain traumas, there's certain things that trigger, right, certain thoughts of previous negative engagements, negative encounters, and so for me, I've been, I would say, better than most at just shoveling all that, in the back, right? And so could it be something that when a trigger takes place, maybe it's not necessarily just that specific moment, or not even that moment when I was a youth, maybe it's just, there's a lot of anger that hasn't been dealt with.
That could be it.
Could that be
It could also be after you go through a situation like that. It could also be not talking about it afterwards.
right?
Because, and it's, men, we don't talk about our emotions. We don't talk about intimate stuff that we think about. We don't like to admit that. I'm talking for myself.
Yeah.
I don't like to admit that I have an anger issue or whatnot. And it's easy to blame deployment. It's easy to blame the way you were raised. It's easy to blame everybody, but really,
The blame game.
the blame is on us.
Right.
It's on the individual. So even though the trigger we're talking about stems from your teenage years, and like you said, you have triggers that come from deployments and all that, it's always going to go to how you handle it afterwards.
Right.
So if you don't handle it afterwards and you don't move, I'm not going to say move forward, if you don't move past it or through it, you're always going to revert to that outburst of emotion. Now, when you're triggered, what feelings do you feel?
Definitely, it's more of an anger.
Anger.
Yeah, anger. like an outwardly aggression, an inwardly aggressiveness.
Okay.
You
So
know.
do you remember the feelings wheel that I showed you?
Yeah.
So the feeling wheel has 3 different levels. It has the inner level, middle level, and the outer level. And the more further apart you get, the more descriptive you are about your feelings.
Right.
So when you say anger, you're right there in the middle. And that's another indication that shows me your intelligence in that area is very, very small.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's more adequate words to express how you feel, you know. So another way to look at it is to realize that you don't have to continue being like this,
Right.
and the goal is not to.
The goal is not to. Yeah.
But it's not 100%. There's gonna be times. So let me ask you a question. When you blow up and you're at home and your kids see this, is that the memory you want for your kids to have it?
Of course not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there, you have an opportunity there to use that to grow further beyond what you've done.
It's a motive.
It's a motive.
It's a motive to want to be better
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah. And a lot of times people that go through this situation, they don't have something valuable like that to think about besides themselves. And unfortunately, we don't value ourselves as much as we should.
Right.
But really, just valuing yourself should be motive enough. We shouldn't have to be like, well, I need to do better because my kids or my wife or whatever. No, we need to do better because we can.
Yeah.
Because you're worth it.
Yeah. It's been great insight, Thomas. I know that we've had these discussions, you know, one-on-one quite a bit, and I was asking another one of our coworkers today, and you know, she was saying that there has been some improvement, you know, in my my kind of outburst behavior, but you know, today was just one of those days where, you know, I will say I've grown, like you said. I mean, my growth is, you know, it's a lifelong thing, right? We never stop growing. We never stop learning about others, about ourselves, about anything. But for me, like, it's really been a, you know, I think today there was just a lot of that built up, you know, stressors that kind of, and today just happened to be that
That's what happens
boiling
when you don't
point.
release.
Right.
So we talked about triggers. Let's talk about things you can do afterwards to relieve that off of your shoulders. So for me, one of the things is talking about it.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've gotten past the, oh my God, I don't talk about my feelings.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But I don't talk about them with everybody, obviously.
Of course.
But some other things, and this is all personal, like everybody's gonna have a different way to let their emotions out. Might be yelling in a pillow, might be swimming, might be running, whatever it is, you know, whoever's watching, you really gotta sit down and figure out what can I really do to relieve stress? And everybody's different.
Yeah.
And every situation may be different. So
Physical exercise is, I really enjoy. I've really been trying to be better at that. Now, I tend to do most of my physical exercise in like the morning time. So maybe after work, if it was a stressful day, just swinging by the gym on the way home, or getting home. And last night, I'll tell you what, last night was great. You know why? Because it was a nice day outside.
Right.
The weather was great. And I got home and I was just out playing basketball and soccer with my kids.
Nice.
And they were burning energy, I was burning energy, but it was just it was a good just release, you know. It wasn't intentional, I didn't plan it, you know. But it's something like that, something to that effect, I think is a good,
good outlet.
Yeah. And it's a positive one,
right.
You know. So for those that might be watching, just, you know, finding that positive outlet, you know, because you can't go to bed every night and continue to be, just have that bottled up, because it's still going to be there.
Yeah, it's gonna affect your sleep.
Right.
It's gonna affect your sciatica,
Really?
stress.
Yeah. Does
Are you
that
kidding me?
really?
Stress. Yeah.
Okay.
So now I know where you hold your stress in your body, physically. It's in your back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's my interesting.
Yeah.
See, this is why we have somebody smart on this thing,
Ah,
Thomas.
Just,
I'm just
just the old dog with some experience. But let's go back. Let's talk about the client.
sure.
I know the client.
Okay.
So imagine how that client feels after that, being told what they were told. I don't want to get into detail.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have the opportunity to talk to anybody right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I guarantee you, she doesn't know how to get rid of that stress.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a focus I think we should talk about for a quick second here.
Yeah.
So you can't push mental health on everybody.
Right.
But there's ways we can talk to our clients and include that. Just like we're having a conversation here, I could do that with every client that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, but I never did it before. I always had an itch to, but I always thought I was speaking out of bound.
Mm.
But
Like it wasn't an appropriate setting?
yeah, like I could easily just be like, hey, come to my office right now. You know,
Yeah.
there's nothing more important in life than taking care of somebody's mental health.
Yeah.
Because without it, they could go off to do worse things to themselves.
Yeah. And negative mental health will lead to negative physical health.
Definitely.
There's a direct correlation. I mean,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
Yeah. So, so how do we get better at discussing these things, and how do we get past this idea that it's no, you shouldn't talk about your feelings, because a lot of women don't talk about their feelings either. I mean, it's just I don't know, it might be a cultural thing, it might be a prideful thing. Like, how do we get better at just opening up that dialogue so that at least we open a door for that?
Well, the first word that comes to my mind is vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
If we show vulnerability, I have this, like, if I'm vulnerable, I feel weak.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually the opposite. It takes a lot of guts to be vulnerable with
Yeah.
somebody. So I think sharing with people some of your vulnerability, you don't have to go deep into it, but showing
Yeah.
that you can be vulnerable will have that person trust that it's okay to be vulnerable with you as well. So I think that's one thing we need to do,
So somebody that doesn't really know what vulnerability or what you're referring to, what would be like an example of showing somebody that you're willing to be vulnerable in a certain setting?
Let me think. One of the best ways I think is to relate that you understand and you've gone through something similar.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, with the situation you were in, I guarantee you were both triggered. So if you went back to that client tomorrow and say, hey, I know what you're going through, you saw me how I was, this is why I reacted this way. You just opened up yourself to something that client didn't know before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that's intimate. It's something you don't tell everybody.
Right.
But in this situation, it'd be okay because it's a shared experience you both have. And I think as veterans, we have a lot of shared experiences, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's easy to talk about the good old days, basic training, deployment,
Right.
and that, but we never talk about life afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about what kind of disability do we have, how much money can we get for this. That's not the important part. The important part is opening up to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sharing your what you're going through with somebody who's going through the same thing opens up a discussion for vulnerability.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's gonna take practice. It's gonna take behavioral therapy for ourselves to be like. And you did that actually earlier today when you called me into the office to talk to that other client that I never met before.
Mm-hmm.
He was going through COVID problems,
Mm.
lost a job and all
Mhm.
that. And what'd you do? You referred me
Mm-hmm.
because and then if I talk to him and I feel like I can't help him, I'm gonna refer him out as well. But that's part of being vulnerable, saying, "Hey, I'm not equipped, but let me get you to somebody who's equipped." And a lot of times we don't do that. We say, "I can take care of it." No, we're not. We're not perfect. We can't take care of everybody. We don't have the training for everything or the experience, and we might not have the relationship with the person to get to a point where we can be vulnerable.
Yeah, that's good. Man.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. I don't know, man. I think we've touched some good stuff. I think that these are situations that, you know, again, I mean, we're primarily trying to reach, you know, the veteran population, but most of everything we discuss can really reach anyone.
Yes.
We just happen to have a background in a certain area, but I think that it's, you know, this is good stuff for, you know, everyone, because I guarantee you, everybody has a bad day at work.
Everybody.
Everybody has triggers.
Everybody's got family members that trigger them.
Yeah.
The ones we love will trigger us the most.
Yeah.
And that's because they know it's best.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
I know that for me, another outlet I like to kind of turn to is comedy.
Yes.
Sarcasm.
Yeah.
And it's not always appropriate, but, you know. Hey, we all do what we gotta do, you know.
For me, it's music.
Yeah.
Music. And I'm terrible at listening to music and realizing what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to say what they're saying, but it comes out something totally different. So I will actually read along with the song as the song plays with the lyrics, and then I'll be like, "Oh, that's what they're saying." And that's a big release for me, because I've been saying lyrics wrong for the last 30 plus years, and
Oh my gosh.
I just I don't know. My ear hears something else. Maybe it's my tinker ears, but
Yeah.
I just, when I read the lyrics, I'm like, oh, now this song makes sense.
Yeah, my it's so funny you say that, man, because I've got some hilarious stories of, you know, my wife, you know, informing me that I was singing the song completely wrong. But the best one is my, I'm not gonna say who it was, but it was somebody in my family. And there was this, I don't remember the specifics, I can't remember, it was a country music song, and it was like something in the chorus, when something along the lines of like, take off your shoes and come on in. But this person was singing, hey donkey shoes, come on in. And like, oh my God, it was great.
You got that wrong, but it's hilarious.
Hey, it was, yeah. Who am I kidding? It was my mother-in-law, but it was. I'm sorry, but hey, it was. We've had some laughs about it, to include everybody, even her involved. That's hilarious, man. Yeah, I'm very guilty of that. So we've been discussing bringing some folks in. I think we're going to try to have a social worker colleague of ours, and we're going to kind of open this dialogue. So for those that may or may not know, in the veteran community, the Veterans Affairs is really starting to understand that there's a big impact with sexual trauma that took place.
MST.
Yeah, military sexual trauma that took place on active duty. And this can include men and women. Nobody.
It doesn't have to be physical, it can be harassment.
Right. And so we all can go back to that Vanessa Guillen the soldier up at Fort Hood who was brutally murdered. We can all see that, but the reality is not so much the murder, but what happened to her before she was murdered. That is much more common than we would like to think, and so we're going to bring somebody on who is going to kind of touch on that a little bit, and there's going to be some resources provided so that if you are or were a victim or are a victim of trauma, now again we're talking specifically towards our knowledge is dealing with veterans and that were victimized on active duty, but this information can go outside of that boundary. Like it can be anybody that's been a victim of any kind of a sexual traumatic event.
Now, did you know there's 3 common side effects of that, which is PTSD, depression, and drug use. Not just drug use, drug abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So those are 3 common things that after the experience that they do, and they're so wrapped in it they don't realize it.
Right. So,
or if you know a veteran
mm-hmm.
or anybody who is, she'll talk more about it, but she's more of the expert on that. But
and it's good, and she does have a little bit of experience in this realm, working with folks that have been victims of trauma,
mm-hmm.
Sexual trauma. So, this is now we're starting to get into some hot and heavy things.
But it needs to be talked about.
It does.
It does. Because that's another thing, going back to vulnerability. If you've been traumatized like that, you don't want to be vulnerable.
Right. You don't want to show any weakness.
Right.
So I don't know. I think that we're gonna, it's gonna be, it's gonna be a little uncomfortable, but I think it's good for us to get out of our comfort zones every now and again.
Hopefully that'll be the next podcast.
That's what we're shooting for. Yeah.
And then we also have somebody else that may come on that's a case manager and works with homeless veterans and she helps find jobs for them.
Okay.
So she's a Navy veteran as well.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll have those lined up soon.
Yeah.
Sure.
And if anybody that's watching knows of anyone that has a unique skill set of working with these subcultures within a culture,
yes.
that can it doesn't matter, the topic is irrelevant, as long as it can benefit at least one person that may or may not see this, then that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So if you're a subject matter expert or know of one, please contact us.
Yeah.
We'll be glad to reach out to them.
Cool, man.
Yep. But until next time, we'll see y'all later.
All right, man.